Going to do a last minute look around just to make sure I haven't forgotten anything silly, which I probably have. And I'm going to wheel it out in the garage, load up the new calibration, and maybe do a little idle test. And I probably won't drive it today. Just fat and happy from eating all that good food at the holidays, and just going to try to chill today. Be cool. So let me just give it a quick look around. Make sure I didn't forget to tighten up anything. I already did a fuel system check earlier, just primed it, but I'll probably do that one more time after I pull it out. I don't want to start it in the garage for the first time just in case something does go haywire. And I will have a fire extinguisher handy. Yep, we're going to roll with that. Tell you what, there's some leaves. If I have a fuel leak, I don't want that catching leaves on fire. Love my 20-volt lithium power stuff. Oh, hey, got some drippage. Looks like got some water. No, ma'am. Don't drink that. No, ma'am. Move. Not to investigate where that came from. Better check the water level before I start this. All right, I'm going to reposition you. It's got a leak. I think it's probably because I got a lot of air in the line still from undoing it. So I may do that a couple times just to get the fuel there. Smelling. I'll go ahead and talk to the other camera now. That's fine. Well, I guess I didn't have any of that. No, motherfucker. Alright, so that was the initial startup with the new injectors. No idea whether I'll be in this shot or not. Essentially, I did the old start and stop my phone video, so probably didn't get anything there. But essentially all I did was I hooked it up to the laptop, loaded in the new calibration, and fired it up. Logged a little bit of data, we'll look at that here in a minute, and did a quick leak check to make sure that nothing was leaking. Things that I noticed, that the fuel pressure gauge is working. It's showing somewhere between 42 and 43, but the surge and idle made it come up and down, and we'll probably see that in the log. And I'm not seeing any leaks or smelling any leaks, which is a good thing. You get to use all your senses with a car. Sight, hearing, touching, smelling. Probably not tasting though, so we'll call it 4 out of 5. Maybe 6. Alright, that's a good good progress. So hey, yeah. I'm going to take a look at that log, see what was going on, and maybe I'll learn something from that. Alright, so I'm back over here on the bench again, and just going to minimize that. Open up AEM log, which is the older of the two, but it's I'm very familiar with it and it's easy to use. So I'll open up the log file that we just played with. Christmas Day, fun. Alright, so it's just a short idle drive, and it loaded the normal template that I usually use. It's a little tough to see that. So essentially this is RPM, load, and O2, and I can see right away that the problem is that we're lean at the idle once the start fuel goes away. If I track this down, it starts out at around 14. That's stoichiometric right away, and that's way lean for a cold start. And so this is usually somewhere down in the 11s and 12s to begin with, and then the start fuel goes away and it eases towards stoichiometric, which is about as lean as it needs to be when it's idle, and especially when it still hasn't warmed up. So once it goes lean like that, we start getting some surging, and that's not unusual. So when it senses that that reduction, and if it gets down below where the crank speed is, it'll dump a whole bunch of fuel into it. So we can see it getting down into the 600s at a few points, even lower. And so plus it's just not right. So I'll probably need to add some fuel in the idle range before I play with any of these start things. Once the engine is running properly, then I usually play with the trims instead of the actual fuel map to get things ready, but I can tell that the fuel map is probably well off here. So that's one of the first things I'll do, is go in and richen up the main fuel map in the idle areas before I play with anything else, and that'll settle the idle down right away. I don't think this is symptomatic of anything else. I'll bet you that if I overlay the start fuel here on one of these graphs, we'll see that most of that bouncing around starts as the fuel goes away. Yep, you can see this is the start fuel, and as it comes in, the engine starts up, and then as it tapers off, it starts raggedy. So let me put that on the oxygen sensor graph, and that'll look better. Didn't need to do that. On graph number 3, we'll put start fuel, and then hopefully you can see that as the start fuel decays, the air fuel mixture goes lean. So I'm not going to add more start fuel. I just need to, because this start fuel was actually just about right, and it's hard to get that right. So what this is telling me is that the actual fuel map is very lean at this point. The closed loop feedback doesn't come until the water temperature is, you know, up to temperature essentially. So if I put the water temperature, coolant temp on the first one, we'll see that, you know, it's essentially flat lined at about 66 degrees, which is pretty close to what it is outside right now. And so there's a certain amount of correction for that as well. And I'm not playing with that because I know my engine. I know how much it needs essentially for the warm-up phase. So this is telling me that the fuel map itself is lean. So how lean? It's a little tough to tell from this, but essentially I can look at where the RPM and the engine load are. Like at this point right now, I picked one of the lean spikes. That's up around 1,000 RPM. So it's at the very lowest RPM. That's when it goes lean. There's a little bit of delay in the oxygen sensor readings, so it's starting to go lean here, and then as the RPM goes down, it's very lean. So around the 900 level, which is, you know, essentially, let's put it on the idle target and see what the idle target is. All right, so I'll get rid of coolant temp because that's kind of irrelevant right now. But if I put the idle target on the top graph, we'll see that the idle target comes down and down and down as it starts. It was looking at about 1900 RPM initially, and then as it comes down, when it really started surging is when the idle target got to about 1400, and that's about the time that the start fuel runs out down here, and that's where we start having the problems. All right, so it's not able to maintain that with the idle speed because those idle air motors aren't that fast reacting. You can make them fast reacting, but it's a fine line between having them be too twitchy and be too laggy. And I think I've got it for like a quarter second right now, the 250 milliseconds essentially, which I found is you know, usually works out pretty well. Idling is a whole nother conversation, let's just put it that way. But those settings were all fairly good for before, so that again just tells me that we need some work on the map. So if I want to know where on the map, I could sit here and look at exactly the RPM and load cell, and then go back to my calibration, see that it's lean at that spot, and then put it up. So at 956 at -6, we're looking in the 18, so it's obviously very lean. Now, like I said in a previous video, it may be that we're lean because the phasing is off, but at the -6 at 900, that's right in this range right here. These 4 blocks contribute to that. So what I'd probably start with is bumping these guys up to, well, I can almost tell already these are not that low. So those settings for those injectors ought to be pretty good. So that either tells me that the phasing is very early and most of that fuel is going right out the exhaust valve, or which you'd think would make it read lean or read rich, but I don't know, it's kind of hard to say. So I'll start by upping these just a little bit. These guys down in here, I'm probably not reaching that, but what I'll probably do, I'll just do it right now. I'll take all these values right here and make them no less than, well, I'll just tell you what. If I just hit plus on all of them and bring them up, we'll start with about right there. We'll bring them up to the 1.5s and even 1.6. All right, there we go. And that'll put them a little bit more in line with I was just hitting the plus key right there, and since I had them all selected, it brought them all up incrementally, and that'll preserve the shape of the fuel map, but it won't it just scales that whole area a little bit better. That right there will probably help if it's interpolating between these different cells. So if it was hitting these cells and pulling the value from the lower ones, that's going to tend to lean out those areas. So it averages, if it's not exactly, let's say it's at 900 RPM, that's going to be in between these two cells because I've got the 750 and 1000 right there. So if it's at 900, it's probably right in between those two cells and it's going to average them. Well, the loads are the same way. So if it was between 519 and minus 519 and minus 684, then it's going to be averaging between those lines. And so essentially what we're dealing with is it's taken from, if it's at 900 at 6.5 5 or something like that, it's going to be averaging out 4 of those cells. And so that's okay. But if it should dip down a little bit and started averaging these 4 cells and these were really low, then it's going to lead to a lean condition there. So I'm going to start with that, see how that changes things, and then I can get right into those individual cells and start bumping things up, and I'll probably wind up doing that in real time. So because I made that change right there, I will save it to a new one, and we're going to call this one, well, if the dialog box pops up, let's try that again. Save as. How about that? We'll change that to, instead of Jan 60 pound A, this will now be 60 pound B. And I'll go ahead and save that. And then one more thing I want to do is go up here to my, was it in setup? Notes. Yep, there we go. And I'm pretty good about keeping notes on all my calibrations. So I'm going to make a new line. My newest notes are always at the top. And I'll go up here and put December 25th, Jan 60 pound B. And I'll put the name of the log file. Log file that prompted these changes. And if I go down here to, I got to go back and look, it was 25/12/19/000. 25/12/19/000. That way I can go back and look at the log. Increased fuel main map, bottom 3 rows to help lean idle. Alright, and that's the only changes I made. So essentially, as you're going through your individual changes, keep notes. You can see that that log file will get larger and larger as time goes by. If I scroll down here, you can kind of see all the changes from log file to log file that I make. If you're working on one car and it's yours, then it's a good idea to do this. If you have a customer car, and you're, not that I need to tell people to do this professionally, how to do their jobs, because that would just be stupid. I am not a professional at this. I just know my own car, and this is how I organize my junk. But if you do this for your own car, that'll help you come back in 6 months to a year. Because once you get the car running fine, you're not in here every day, and you'll forget what you did. And sometimes you need to revert back to changes that you made, because you can tune yourself right out of a good running car, and you'll need to know what a good checkpoint was. But obviously, now that I've replaced the injectors, that makes all previous calibrations, you know, obsolete. And the pre-turbo calibrations obviously are obsolete. So major component changes require to essentially start over, but you're never really starting over, if that makes any sense. So anyways, just a little method of work. I will give this another shot, but not right now. I got some family time and everything. But that's the method. It started up, so that's good. It just didn't idle very well. And I'm not going to drive it until it'll idle, because I cannot stand getting stuck at a stoplight or a stop sign. That's just embarrassing and wrong. So, all right, guys, we'll catch you in a little bit.